Hi, so today we need to remove the old vanity from the bathroom. I need to take the vanity that we've got built so far, install it on the wall where it's going to go so that I can then plan where the plumbing is going to be and determine how deep the drawers can go before we can actually build the drawers. Now there are probably 100 ways to remove a vanity from a bathroom, but what I find is the fastest way is a method that was actually developed here in the Southwest. Dynamite. So I placed a call earlier this week to Acme Tools and ordered some Wiley Signature Series dynamite expressly for this job. So let's remove a vanity. Dynamite! Whoa! So I'm trying to prep this area for installing the top part of the vanity. Now it's not going to be permanently installed. In fact, I still, because of a trip, I didn't even get the last 2 coats of varnish on the top. So it needs more work, plus I'll be doing some of the facings for like the drawers will be done in the shop where it's a lot more convenient. But what I want to do is I want to install it at least temporarily so that I can take all the measurements that I'm going to need, and at the same time it gives me a good chance to mark out where things are going to go on the wall so that I can, in spare time during the week when you get bored, because everybody loves doing drywall when they're bored, is fix some of the patches that might become visible, patch up some of the pieces that got ripped and torn. So I was able to add this simple cleat back here. It's level, all these lines have been drawn level. So I placed the cleat here, it's directly into a stud, so this is good that I've got one dead in the middle. And now I'll be able to simply take the top, put it here, and then I can just rotate this temporary holder up so that it'll hold it in place. Now I'll need one over here as well. Now for here, I had a stud here in the corner, which of course the vanity top is going to be bolted directly into. But the other one is way over here by the door. So there isn't one near the edge of this vanity top. So what I did is I took a big slice of drywall here out and slipped the 2x4 into the wall. Now the 2x4 goes all the way down to the bottom, so I put a drywall screw here where it'll be behind the base molding, just so that it holds it in place, keeps it from wanting to slide to the side. And then I put another one here where the drywall screw is actually where the vanity top is going to be covering it. So this is holding it in place. Later, when I put the whole thing together, there'll be a lag bolt that goes in here. So in a way, what I'm doing is I'm using a front leg on the vanity top, but the leg is installed in the wall. Now you can see from that description that there's going to be a backsplash going right over top of that plug. Obviously I want the plug. So my intention with the backsplash is that as it comes across, I'm going to drill holes that'll be very similar to the pattern that you have on a normal outlet cover into that backsplash portion so that you'll be able to get at the plug. And that's the reason I chose the 37 inches, is it got it right underneath. I was going for 37 to 38, but obviously going to 38 means a whole lot more work moving that plug. So I have the drywall patch setting right now, and I propped up the top part of the vanity. What I'm doing though is I'm just simply using this to measure off the bottom of this vanity top to where the plumbing is located, and basically there's sort of a band down here from about 8 to 14 inches where there's plumbing that's going to be in the way of the back of the bottom segment. So I took a look at the bottom segment, and it turns out that there's a rail. Only one rail is involved. The one rail comes very close to passing just between the drain and then the water supplies, but worst case, I can cut that one rail. That was always planned that there would probably be 1, possibly 2 rails that need to be cut. And then there's the stud right down here, down the middle, where I'll be making shims in order to keep the front level, both vertically and horizontally, and also that's how I'm going to bolt it to the wall. And then after that's done, then the top and the bottom segment get bolted together. So I've been working on dimensioning the drawers, and the stock has been, as I go through, I wrap it back up just to make sure nothing wants to move on me due to humidity or unbalanced removal of the wood. And these have all been ripped to the correct widths for their particular spots in the vanity. I've been testing it out in the vanity, which is actually hiding behind you, if you can, don't back up. The sizes, though, they're too wide. I'm going to be doing some cross-cutting here in a moment to go and square all those up. But before that, I'm going to go ahead and put the groove in the bottom for the drawer. Now, the drawer bottom that's fitting in, I'm just going to put 3/8 Baltic birch ply. The reason I'm using 3/8 is because some of these drawers are fairly large. I mean, they're almost 22 inches wide on the bottom, going back around the foot. I just don't want a lot of sagging. Who knows what they're going to put in there. Somebody might want to put some bowling balls in the vanity. It's not going to be glued in place. It's going to be done just like a floating panel, like you would on a more traditional drawer, but I'm going to just use ply for simplicity and for replacement. So we can easily unscrew the piece of ply from the back, slide it out, slide a new piece in. This way here, if for some reason somebody leaves the tap running too long, or some kid creates a big puddle of water on the top of the vanity and it gets into some of the drawers, it's not a big deal to replace it. Just pop out the bottom and pop in a new one after the sides have dried out. Now the reason we're going to put the groove for the drawer bottom in right now is because I'm going to be doing dovetails on these drawers, and I need to know where the groove is going to be located. Now, of course, I could mark it and all that, but why not? I need to cut this anyway, and I've got everything going on the saw right now. So if I put the groove in now, it's going to be very easy for me to know exactly where to lay out the pins and the tails to make sure that we have a tail on the sides covering up the groove that's embedded in it, as well as in the back, we're going to know where to offset the pin, because in the back is actually shorter than the sides because we're allowing for the panel to sneak in underneath. And we'll see that in more detail in a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and do the grooves, and then we're going to do some cross-cutting and get these drawers to the point where I can start actually joining them. Now, while this episode's gone through a number of different things, it hasn't really concentrated or focused on any one particular item. Now, the next episode, my intention is that I have 6 drawers in this vanity, and what I'd like to do is I'm going to do hand-cut dovetails on all 6 drawers, but I'm going to do them 6 different ways. So I have them all outlined how I want to do them, so I can show you. It'll use different tools for each one of the drawers, but I'll go through the techniques, and so you can get an idea of which one maybe you'll gravitate to, or maybe you'll see a different way that you hadn't done before and want to give it a try, and maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. Now the pressure's on because somebody who watches my podcast, Mark Rhodes, actually does professional woodworking, and he does hand-cut dovetails on all of his drawers, so I'm going to have to man up and make sure these look good. So that means this video has had no takeaway yet. So what I'm going to do is I'd like to actually describe something that became a little bit of a conversation after my last video. Now, the last video I did a lot of the sculpting, and along the way I was tenting the boards. I was getting them wet and I was tenting them. And Russ, another Phoenix woodworker, was asking me, because he's actually was having a little bit of wood movement issues with mahogany on his project, which is an Aurora nightstand. I realized that I probably haven't really explained that well, so I thought I'll explain what I do, and then I'll explain why I think it works. The technique involves, it's a good coincidence that I'm wearing a Charles Neal woodworking t-shirt, because part of this evolved by watching his guild and seeing that whenever Charles runs a board through a planer or anything that's going to possibly unbalance the wood's moisture gradient, he pops it in a plastic bag or just throws it on a bench and covers it with some plastic. For the longest time, whenever I would resaw wood, now since Russ asked this question, I got to use purple. Whenever I would resaw a board, it would come out sort of cup against cup. So the board would cup, it would look like this when it comes out of the bandsaw. The kerf would be here. So as a beginning woodworker, of course, I said, no problem, I've got clamps, I can take care of that. So of course I would just simply clamp it this way and leave it overnight. Then I'd look at it the next day, and maybe it wasn't quite as bad as that, but it was still pretty darn close. So I was losing a fair amount of wood when I was doing the resawing. So what I did afterwards is you used to hear people talk about, oh, well, when there's a cup in the board, fill the cup with water and it'll expand, and then it'll be flat. And then when it's flat, You know, some people would even say, when it's flat, finish your machining and get it into the frame. I'm thinking, well, that seems like a time bomb. It's going to blow eventually. So, but I would try that. Instead, what I would do is I would take the boards like this, and then I would get them really wet with a sponge, and then I'd clamp them down. I had better success with that. But the problem is that it's so dry here, the water goes into the surface, but then it quickly comes off the surface, so it hasn't actually had a really long duration to help the wood out. So then I start seeing Charles sticking things into a bag, and I'm thinking, that's going to keep it moist longer. So then I started to think about this, and the way that I think this works is, let's take a look at a board. If we have this long board here, or let's just assume it's got a 12% moisture in the middle. The outsides are probably, after they've been in my shop for a little while, these are probably going to go more towards 8% to the outsides. Common knowledge, if I go in here and I run it through a planer and I lop off 1/8 of an inch over here, well, I might have taken it down now to seeing where the moisture is actually 9% on this side. I've gone down to that depth. So now I leave this sitting on the table. It's got the 8 here and it's got a 9 on that side. It's going to try balancing itself. So what it's going to do is it's going to try getting rid of moisture out of the surface to get itself down to 8%. Now whenever you go to lose moisture, wood is going to shrink. Whenever it goes to dry, it shrinks. As it goes down to 8%, it's going to cup this direction. So far I've told you nothing new. What my theory goes off of is that when I get the boards wet, I actually get them wet enough that they get runs and drips. I don't want it just spritzed and looking wet. I actually want to see runs and drips. So if I get this side here saturated with water, and this side saturated with water, even though I didn't do anything to this side, it's going to absorb the moisture. Now, I don't have so much moisture in here that it's going to completely saturate this whole panel. It's only going to go in a little ways. But what you want to do is you want it to go in as far as it needs to equalize this gradient, so that in a way the moisture stops moving. So you're going to get this saturation where it's going to go kind of underneath the surface of this side and underneath the surface of this side, until it gets itself back to a balance. It's not going to be at 8% anymore over here. It's not going to be at 9% over here, but you don't really care because it's back to being balanced. Now, when you put it under the tent, the benefit of that is that this moisture on the surface doesn't get to just barely penetrate and then go back out and re-evaporate. So you're leaving it in there, you're giving it the chance to actually get into that equilibrium point, and then any of the extra moisture just goes off as humidity in and around inside the tent. Now getting back to the drawer stock that I was cutting for this vanity, when I went through the maple, I actually had it coming off cup to cup like that. But when I was done, I actually ended up having about about a half inch in that opening on one of the shorter boards. So that's actually fairly significant, and honestly hard maple is one of the harder ones to kind of correct. So I got it wet on the two sides, stickered the boards, and as you saw in the video earlier, I didn't hit it in a planer. I just went ahead and took all those boards and ran them through the drum sander. There was that little to take off. All I was doing was taking off any minor cup imperfections on the edges. Now, whether it's got any scientific backing to it or not, I don't know, but so far I'm buying into this theory, and I try to use this theory when I try to decide if I want to put more moisture or less or longer in a tent or not. And so far it's working really, really well for me.